Om yatadipo nivatasto nengati sopamasmrita. Yogino yatachatasya yunjato yogam atmanaha. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. Like a candle in a windless place, its flame steady and unflickering. So too is the mind of the yogi, still and unwavering, meditating deep within upon the all-abiding Atman and steeped in yoga. Om peace, peace, peace. And then and there they see Brahman. There shines Brahman. May that Brahman protect us. May that Brahman sustain us. And may that Brahman illumine our thinking consciousness. May we not find fault with each other, but the teachings of the world. And always be free of fault finding and revealed and illumined in the essence of the teachings. Om peace, peace, peace. Peace be unto us, and peace be unto all. Om Hari Om, Hari Om, Hari Om Tat Sat. After our one Sunday of absence because of the seminar last weekend on the bijams, the mantra, and the deities, we return here for a one-off class, which is a little different for us. We've been doing 2 and 3 and 4 class series and going on week to week like that. But at this time, give us a chance to just take one class and study it deeply. And I've always been wanting to introduce and present a class on that yoga called Kriya Yoga. We know there are the 4 yogas: Jnanam, Bhakti, Raja, and Karma. And we were talking last week as if there was a 5th one in Mantra Yoga, but that's pretty much shared by all the yogas. For instance, even Karma Yoga, as we talked about, you're doing your mantra while you work and sort of in the background. And then when you sit in meditation, you bring it to the foreground and use it to control, purify the mind. And eventually it becomes a bubbling spring of ambrosia, to quote the scriptures. So with all those yogas in there, then we have another one presented to us here in terms of Kriya Yoga, but not to worry, because it's really a part of that Raja Yoga system that Father of Yoga, who is named Patanjali in that particular lifetime, some 100 or 150 years after the birth of Christ in India, which shows you that these great beings are just going on taking embodiment in India over many centuries and millennia. And he composed at that time the 8-limbed yoga, reformatted it, reformulated it, how you ever want to call that. I like to say composed because facets of yoga had become very widely dispersed, not just in terms of the Kriya Yoga, the way it's used nowadays, which I'll speak a little about, but in terms of, say, 18 different yogas, which are the names of the chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. Every one of those is a yoga. Like even the first one, there's a yoga of depression that people fall into, kind of like, oh, I've become one with this brooding mind, and I need to raise myself out of that. So if you could title it, put a marker on it, indicate it somehow, then you can know that it either needs to be worked on or it deserves to be attained. So that's the universal nature of the word yoga. So in terms of Kriya Yoga, then what we find in the second pada of the Yoga Sutras, there are 4 padas to the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. And as I said, he composed and brought together these 8 limbs. We often look at the tree of yoga there. And if we look at the Yamas, the Niyamas, and asana and pranayama and and then controlling the mind, pratyahara, dharana, concentration, dhyan, meditation, and samadhi, which is supposed to all lead to, according to all the great souls. Then you might say Kriya Yoga sort of takes a back seat to that, and hard to find its presence. And since one of the aspects of Kriya Yoga is devotion to God, which is something hardly mentioned by the father of Samkhya, Lord Kapila, the father of Yoga, Patanjali, and father of Vedanta, Vedavyasa. These fathers are an affectionate term we're using for them because they brought the focus of collective consciousness in on those yogas in their particular time frame. But since those three great fathers, and there are actually slokas about those three that you can recite, created later by commentators on Samkhya Yoga and Vedanta. And because of their philosophical bent and their paying of attention to the various problems that were arising in the ages that they lived in, then they would have a very sparse mention of the existence of God. It was more like, here's the practice, and just do the practice, and then you'll know what God is if you want to ask the question. And so that's become sort of a characteristic of all Indian darshanas, say like Buddhism, that you don't hear a lot about. Buddha talk about God as a name. So because the rishis of India, Buddha included, knew that divine reality, pure conscious awareness, timeless, deathless consciousness, however you want to call it, treating it tenderly as far as names and forms go, because they knew that it was beyond the fivefold Maya, name, form, time, space, and karma, or cause and effect, then it couldn't really be defined or described. We have beautiful slokas in the Upanishads by other rishis too that tell us this too, is basically that speech and mind fall back in awe, not being able to either describe it or fathom it. So mind can't fathom it, speech can't define it. And so it falls back in awe and just looks in silence of deep meditation upon this ocean of light, which we just talked about, this ocean of Brahman. So when they do put forth systems then in Samkhya, Yoga, Vedanta, Buddhism, and so forth, they'll fill these with methods and teachings, dharma, in our case, jnanam or atmagyan, knowledge, deepest knowledge of the true nature of the self and its oneness with Brahman. So those are all beautiful facets of our path, of Indian paths. Next week, I'll give a talk about the Adidaiva Vidya, the eternal wisdom of India. The subtitle to it is What the Modern West Needs to Learn from the Ancient East. And you'll be surprised at a few things that it has to learn from the East, like the five senses. As if we don't know that already, yeah, we know that they're there, but we don't know how to control them. So then the five elements are sometimes looked at in that way too, but they're in various combinations, and we don't know how much of the combination is in one and not in the other. And we pretty much just look at them as a amalgam of each other and don't study them each for their own source of origin, each for their own root. And that tends us to go, our senses to go outward. So the Mundaka Upanishad says, the senses are outward gored by nature, therefore they're defective. So to remove those defects, you have to turn the senses inward. And this is what we want to learn from the ancient East. And yoga is the best darshana to do that. I mean, Samkhya lays it out for us, what's outside, what's inside, and what's beyond both. And then Patanjali comes along and pretty much tells us how to meditate on each one of those as foundations for consciousness. Tattvas or alambanas. We use the word tattva back in Samkhya Lord Kapya's time, introduced the word alambana in Father of Yoga's time, many millennia later. And then pretty much you have a good building blocks and stepping stones back inward to what Vedanta calls Samadhi, and what yoga is also calling Samadhi. So what I'm saying here, with a lot of words trying to describe the indescribable, is laying a foundation for Kriya Yoga. I was rather averse to doing it, but I did look up in a more modern search what people are calling Kriya Yoga and find out, as I suspected back in the 70s and 80s, that they're using Kriya Yoga as exercises for the breath and body, basically asana and pranayama, and also a study of physical nerve endings and how to get health, how to have the physical prana in a good order, as if the yogi likes to go sit in the river and clean the inside of his bowels and do breathing exercises and so forth. And the yogi wants to have samadhi. The yogi wants to meditate without the body intruding on the process. The yogi wants to be able to concentrate beyond the diseases of the body. And so the yogi, as the Father of Yoga himself says, is, how does he put it in second sloka, second pada, sloka 24? He puts it very briefly. He only mentions Ishvara, or God with form, twice in the Yoga Sutras. So he says, Samadhi Shuddhir, no, Samadhi Siddhir, Ishvara Pranidhana. So I mean, Samadhi means the perfection of Samadhi comes about only via self-surrender to God. So though he might not mention God, he's right there in the slokas, he's saying how important one of the aspects of Kriya Yoga is to the yogi. That's Ishvara Pranidhana. So I said that the Kriya Yoga had sort of disappeared behind the overall Patanjali system. It was so favored by the commentators, so many of them since Patanjali lived a couple hundred years after Jesus, that his name got assigned to it. And you don't see that with any of the other sacred darshanas. Is that, and you might say Buddhism, got Buddha's name for it, but Patanjali is one of the words for the eight-limbed yoga. Raja Yoga, the kingly yoga, is another. And Ashtanga Yoga, the eight-limbed, is another. So you have these different references and titles they put on this system of yoga, which is a balancing and an aligning of all the centers, like you would find, say, in Kundalini Yoga, and connecting them up and raising consciousness by degrees to each one of them. And so you'll find the yogi ending up on the eighth limb in samadhi and able to fathom everything that went before, called samyama, putting together his power of concentration with his ability to meditate without distraction, with his experience that God grants him or her, the yogi or the yogini, all combined. So the self-surrender to Ishvara then is going to put you in a non-dual state. In fact, that's really what samadhi siddhir means. Samadhi siddhir means the non-dual state of samadhi. It's perfect. And if it's only attained, that non-dual state that the yogi's practicing for and looking for, by the grace of God. So you'll find this also in accordance with what Holy Mother, Shisharda Devi, the Ishvari form, the ideal of this ashram and Ramakrishna order, for instance, what she says about samadhi too. It's only through the grace of God, through practice and meditation and even mantra, you don't get that perfection. It comes only by the grace of God. So you can see that all the seers along the way and seeresses have all come to this conclusion that when they've reached the highest state, it's been granted to them by some unseen hand, by some untold presence. So one of the ways that you can set up this eight-limbed yoga, according to the Father of Yoga himself, is through Kriya Yoga. So when I looked online And as I was saying, unfortunately, I found that most of these Kriya Yoga versions that have come along, let's say over the last 15 to 800, 1800 years that people have been studying Patanjali Yoga, are pretty much associated only with body, breath, and nervous system. So that's unfortunate because all the seers themselves, as I've just explained in the last few minutes, are looking at yoga as samadhi, and that's the highest thing to attain. So they're not going to want to have anything in the way of moving inward towards this highest goal. And so we find that Patanjali himself has built into the eight-limbed yoga this original, authentic Kriya Yoga system. And we'd be surprised to find out what it consists of when we looked at it. That is, if we're taken off guard or distracted by these inferior versions of Kriya Yoga, which are causing us to concentrate on body and breath, which are the lower of the sixth Ashtanga Yoga, that is, the lower of the six limbs. Before this lower of the six limbs are limbs 7 and 8, which are really limbs 1 and 2 called Yamas and Niyamas. So you can see the tendency there if you start looking to build your spiritual life on asana and pranayama without regarding the first two limbs that Patanjali himself set forth, you're going to be running against the grain of yoga. You're going to be overlooking what Kriya Yoga really is. Why is that? Because Kriya Yoga, it consists of elements of the first two limbs. That's called Yama and Niyama, right? And we know there are 5 Yamas and 5 Niyamas. So if you just jump to asana and pranayama and concentrated there, you're not only foregoing these upper limbs, unless you just practice and put the body and breath aside once you've attained a few months of balance in them, and go on to concentrating the mind and having concentration and meditation, then that way you would have forgotten create the true Kriya Yoga. If you were to look back, or if you were to start off with the 5 Yamas, then you would say, well, my teachers need me to be truthful. I need to be honest and truthful, satyam. And my teachers need me to be nonviolent. Tantra starts out with nonviolence too. That's one of the great darshanas of India that not only Advaita-hina, he wants to be non-dual, but he also wants you to be ahimsa. He wants you to be nonviolent. So that's also the case with the second yama. I'm talking about the first limb of yoga, right? So you have satyam and you have ahimsa, so truthful and nonviolent, and then non-covetousness, and that's even going to be taken deeper when you get to non-receiving of gifts. And then also you want to be continent and moderate in your appetites, balanced in everything. For householders, that means one thing, and for the monks that means something more extreme. Nevertheless, you've got these very powerful yamas that are being introduced to you, and you haven't found Kriya Yoga yet. Those are what Patanjali calls observances. Those are the main observances of a person who's leading a dharmic life: to be truthful, not to covet things or get attached to them. As I say, what the West needs to learn from the East about the 5 senses is how to withdraw them from things and store up their energy. The senses have a lot of energy going out. There's the deity of fire in the eyes, the deity of earth in the tongue, and the deity of ether in the ear. You see, so those are the deities with the senses, have a lot of power. So if you're putting them outward on everything, they will go outward in a flow towards things, and you might get attached to them. You might want to possess the things that fire lights up, that earth causes you to taste, that the nose appeals aromas and so forth. But then you never heard maybe from some great teachers says, withdraw the mind from those things direct them inside to the tanmatras using your prana. That's the energy you got from breathing. And then focus them on internal objects, tanmatras, and connect those then to the psychic prana in the mind. It's all an involution that's going on. We've studied it many times. But back to the point of this is that um, the five yamas are observances, but they're key observances. You can't really start on the path of yoga unless you're nonviolent, but so many people have started on the path of yoga and found themselves to be doing harm to others. And in thought, for instance, maybe they might not let their limbs go to create some physical violence, but inside they're jealous, they're angry, they're they have violent tendencies and so forth. And these come out later, and then they think, oh, I have to go see a psychiatrist or something. But that yoga psychology was not observed at the beginning. The Eastern psychology wants you to make sure that these things are observed as the main components of life, not getting a family, not making money, not having a job. The main components of life would be to have these five yamas in hand so that anything you do, like getting a job or making money, will be done in a truthful way, such anything you do, anything you think, and will be done in a non-violent way. That is, any progress you make in amongst people in the workplace is done non-violently and without rancor, without jealousy. Then if those five main components of yogic life are observed, then that first limb is satisfied. And still you haven't found Kriya Yoga. So now he wants you to begin to get ready to practice. You see, now you've got the basis upon which you can do a practice without karmic effects coming back at you. That's limb number 2. It's called Niyama. And those he calls not just observances like the first 5, but those he calls practices. So first one that comes up, and it's very key, is tapas. It's austerity. And there's the first introduction or the first presence of Kriya Yoga that you find is in tapas. Basically, it means if you know how to withdraw the senses from things and be nonviolent and don't covet things externally and be free of being influenced by gifts given to you coming your way, just be even, like in yoga. Oh, then I'm now able to do real austerity. So I'm finding out that the yamas have set me on the path, but I'm not. They're also opening up my imperfections to me. You see, my inconsistencies are still within me. Even if I've declared myself to be nonviolent, truthful, and so forth, then I'm getting to the karmas of this lifetime, prarabdha karma, or the karma from past lifetime, due to which I took the birth in this lifetime to annihilate or to neutralize. So then he's got you set up on that way, and then all of a sudden you see these the encroachment of these imbalances on your yogic balance. And so you're at about that time, he says, okay, that's why I'm giving you the second limb consisting of 5 things, and 3 of them are most key to your practice. The first one is tapas, austerity, and we can show this chart now for the viewers. First one is tapas, austerity, and second one is svadhyaya. And the third one is Ishvara Pranidhana. You can see the chart there. People here in the class can see it. And I'm putting them in order of how they appear in the second limb of Niyamas in the 8 limbs of yoga. It's how they are introduced in the second pada. And like I said, like sloka 45 has to do with Ishvara Pranidhana. So the slokas just preceding 245, if you want to look them up, are about tapas and Svadhyaya. So I would say that's a good order because if you were to say, and many people do this, start with Svadhyaya and start studying the scriptures, and you haven't learned how to to keep your austerity, your vows, for instance. So you say, well, I'm going to pick up a book here and I vow to finish it. A real yogi would think, I'm not just going to go pull that book on the shelf and read a few pages and walk away and then later tell somebody, I read the Gita or something. I have to read the whole thing, Paul. I have to be truthful. And to be nonviolent and so forth. All of those yamas that I'm just considering are going to be based upon what I do now in life. And if I'm able to do austerity, then it's the one thing people don't take to. They'll go to conventional methods like pills or psychiatrists or methods that are modern methods that people are telling them, like regimens of food. Some very queer breathing exercises like Kriya breath that have come along. I mean, that's another problem with the Kriya Yoga system of today. Those ones they're looking at is that Kriya, the word Kriya has a lot of different definitions. The definition I like is fourfold. You've got Icha Shakti, you've got Drovya Shakti, and you've got Jnana Shakti, and you've got Kriya Shakti. It's one of the main powers of Divine Mother, Kriya Shakti. So it really means the spontaneous way in which she conducts all activities out here through billions of souls. In all the 7 worlds, the Divine Mother is conducting activity. Like Vivekananda would say, O Divine Mother, in whose activity no respite rests, granting unceasingly the fruits of action done, and distributing incessantly all action yet to come, may she bestow her boon of blessing upon me forevermore. So Vivekananda's looking at the Mother of the Universe, whose holy hands hold pleasure and hold pain, but yet she's the doer of good to all beings. If they have this karma of having to act in body and in physical form, then she's going to watch them as they do this and give them these practices. She's going to make sure that amongst the denizens of the earth, a Kapila will come to give you the order of the Tapas. A Patanjali will come to show you how to meditate on them and get Samadhi. And a Vedavyasa will come and tell you, now that you've had Samadhi, here's what Samadhi really consists of. From beginning of an age to the end, you've got these great rishis, they're called, or seers of truth, that are always on hand to make sure that the aspirant and the devotee is shored up and imbued with these great practices. And what I'm saying here, I guess, is that people aren't able to go very deep into them, like say studying the scriptures or doing rituals to Ishvara, cursing their devotion to God without tapas. So you can see there that Patanjali is well thought in his order of things, just like Lord Copley was for the 24 cosmic principles. So this chart is our lead chart. Let's look at it. Now that you know what I've said and how I've introduced it and where it comes from, we're talking about the second limb of yoga called Niyamas, 3 of those 5, right? That's Kriya Yoga to Patanjali. That's your consummate practice. There are other things in there, concentration, meditation, purification and so forth. But as far as she's concerned, if the devotee who arrives at the second limb can put the power of these 3 niyamas together, then that will ensure that they can go beyond the occult powers which come to them through hatha yoga and pranayama, through asana and pranayama, because that's what they're going to encounter when they start looking inside. First thing you see, just like the first thing you would see out here, and is sun shining and waterfalls and fruits on the trees. The outward senses are going to undergo those and enjoy them. They don't see suffering lingering in there. Adam and Eve didn't. So, I mean, whatever story you look at in religion, they look at the beautiful paradise. They don't see the suffering behind it. But we know Lord Buddha's first noble truth is there is suffering here. So you should probably come with even eyes. To good and bad, their eyes are even, O mother. Your grace falls upon fortunate and unfortunate alike. Vivekananda says about her, and she's guiding all things and all beings in this outer world. So the next world inward is you'll come upon also some bitter fruits, called occult powers. And everyone from Krishna to Ramakrishna has warned about them in the various scriptures, from the Gita to the Gospel. And so that's why tapas is going to be very much at the head of the list. You should be able to do without. You should be able to renounce. You should be able to detach. You should be able to give away. You should be able to withdraw. Even so much as from the body when it gets diseased and it's about to die. From cradle to the grave, this power to withdraw consciousness back to its source is the essence of tapas. So he says here in the scriptures about tapas, this is in the Yoga Sutras, tapas is austerities or ascetic practices that purify the mind, and this is important, without taxing the body. So one asana, for instance, according to Shankar and others, doesn't tax the body. You master the position, and if you master the position, what do you master? According to the advices. Yeah, the first word particularly. Yes, he says the three worlds. Very good. You master the A of Om is another way of putting that. And so, but the teaching Gaudapada gives us that one asana that's really, really pure like that will give you access to all three worlds without moving, because you don't move when you go to the heavens. In fact, you stop moving, isn't it? Your body dies. You can't get to the heavens unless it's by some supernal vision, unless you drop the body. Even in deep sleep, you've dropped the body. In dream, you've dropped the body. You've stopped breathing. So how far are asana and pranayama going to get you if you're attached to them? It'd be better to see them and detach from them so that you can make this inward movement without attachment to breath and body. So this is all just sensible. It's nonsensible when you look at a lot of the Kriya Yoga systems, the way they put it. It attaches you to body and senses and brain and nervous system. You're wanting outside of those because you've already got those. See, if there's a problem in them, do some purificatory practices. But what's the best purificatory practice? Is austerity. What's the best austerity? Devotion to God. Krishna says in the Gita, Ishvara Pranidhana. And what is the best way to get to God? A mantra. So if you step back into all these other yogas that you've been learning about and you begin to connect them like this, then you're beginning to develop this real love for the one true Kriya Yoga that Patanjali has given us. 3 of the Niyamas are the Kriya Yoga. So that's tapas. He says Vedavyasa commented on Father of Yoga's system. He's probably the greatest name of all commentators, although there's some really great ones. After Patanjali had composed it, then there were the commentators. Vedavyasa came about. So I looked in his commentary on the Yoga Sutras and found these quotes for Kriya Yoga. About tapas, he says, and this is the Father of Vedanta we're talking about, the spiritual life of a non-ascetic neither progresses nor succeeds. Without purification, karmas, kleshas, and vasanas only increase, creating a net which cannot be loosened or broken. But Patanjali avers that so long as the body is not overtaxed, the sincere tapasvan should practice austerity for purification of the mind. The body came out of your mind. You thought the body, then it happened on earth. So before I need a body, so what am I going to need? A couple parents, and I'm going to need them, who want to have children, and then I'm going to take birth in a body. So the body is all just a matter of course as you leave the embodied state in the bhuvaha and swaha regions, because you have to come back from those regions, right? Bhur, bhuva, swaha. You have to come back from those regions And some can do that consciously. Most don't do it with karmas, kleshas, and samskaras still in potential. And if you don't know what those words are, karmas, of course, good, bad, and mixed repercussions from past actions. Kleshas are the five kleshas, which Patanjali has already talked to us about. Avidya, attachment, aversion, and so forth, as ignorance, egotism, attachment, aversion, and what he calls fear of death or clinging to life are five kleshas. And then the vasanas are your mind, or making formations based in the five kleshas and the unresolved karmas. If you didn't have unresolved karmas and you were a master of the kleshas, those vasanas would not be in the mind when you were born, like the pure souls. See, but since they are, then people are forming more samskaras from the presence of kleshas and karmas already in their subconscious mind. So this is how, whether you do it from inception out or from back to the origin of things in the thinking process, how the rishis look at things like rebirth and how to break the chain of transmigration. Tapas will stand first. It'll make you strong so that you can go through these practices and take them to the ultimate source and benefit from them. Since we want to make sure we have enough time to really define Kriya Yoga, let's go to the second of the three elements of Kriya Yoga found in the second limb of Niyamas in the 8 limbs of yoga by Patanjali. It's Svadhyaya. Study of scriptures, recitation of mantras, memorization of slokas. You can see that if you looked at your past SRV life for the last 35 years or so, that all of these have been enjoined as teachings, methods for you to practice. Vedanta, we're Vedantas, but we want to go on practicing. And when you enter into the realm of practice, that's where that yoga as practice comes forward to you. So I've often heard that. It says, well, you already told us the non-dual truth, Vedanta, Advaita and all that. We're really interested in that, but now do we really need to practice all these other things you're talking about? And I would say, if you want to understand non-duality and realize it fully and have samadhi, then, anything that comes up that is an impasse or a blockage to understanding non-duality the way you heard it originally from your teacher needs to be treated. That's where you go to the practice of yoga to do it. So this is why practice is a triple gem of practice like this is very beautiful. I'm austere and strong. I can take anything. Now hand me the scriptures. Oh, thank you, Lord. Isn't it? Ishvara Pranidhana. Oh, thank you for those beautiful words in the scriptures. So it's get strong, hear the truth, and thank the Lord. What else would it be? And this is what Father of Yoga is calling Kriya Yoga. It's not a breath, and it's not just an action like Divine Mother does spontaneous action. This is the actual triple tenet of Kriya Yoga, and it always has been and always will be. And it refines the other limbs of yoga, makes you ready for them. So he says here about it, that is back to Vedavyasa now, says the Moksha Shastras, that's the scriptures on liberation, the Moksha Shastras, profound and insightful wisdom about the knowledge of the self gleaned by the seers, coupled with the devout recitation of the pranava, that's Om, the sacred syllable Om, these make up the noble practice of Svadhyaya. And so again, what I was just saying, that's what in SRV life, that's why we've been practicing focusing so much on Svadhyaya, that we keep reading the scriptures, hearing the truth, contemplating them. In Vedanta, is it not there just because you've heard the non-dual truth, or you're supposed to Shravana, hear it again and again, then Manana, roll it over your mind again and again, and then Nididasana, have direct experience of it again and again. And so those is three states of hearing the truth. A lot to say about all of these, but You've got the quotes right there by both the Father of Yoga and the Father of Vedanta. Let's move forward to fully define what Kriya Yoga is. The third aspect of the three is Ishvara Pranidhana. It really means, Pranidhana means self-surrender. So you want to find the Lord and surrender to him, her, it. You can do it with the Ishvari, the Divine Mother. You can do it with Ishvara, the Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva forms. You can also do it with that, Brahman. I surrender my whole life to the formless Brahman. And many people who prefer formlessness as their religion, and I'm talking about, that's a lot of Westerners too, they will find a way to surrender themselves to such an ideal as formlessness. So the definition there given, devotion in all its aspects, along with self-surrender to Ishvara. Devotion in all its aspects are, I'm telling someone I had a dream a couple nights ago where I was walking around doing this with incense to everything. So I have a mrigamudra, I have a lit stick of incense in my hand, and I'm doing this for everything I see in my dreams. And as I did that, because that's part of puja, all its aspects, right? As I did that, two eyes formed, one higher, one lower. And this wasn't these two eyes at all. These are inner eyes. And I was aware that these two eyes sprouted in me. And by one, I could see the light. By one, I could see the worlds, the higher worlds. And everything I did like this gave me a feeling of samadhi. So I had a very beautiful dream and woke up remembering that. So that's like an example of an aspect of puja that you could do that for decades in front of an altar, like a Brahmin priest, or like Sri Krishna did to the image of Mother Kali in the Dakshineshwar temple and so forth. And then only years, maybe decades later, realize what you're doing, see, and be given the fruit of what you did. All of a sudden, swapna siddha, it's called perfection in a dream. So these things can come to you in 4 or 5 different ways. So this is just a further explication of devotion in all its aspects. You just can't say, oh, there's the Lord, I surrender myself completely. Very good. But let's do some practices in Ishvara Pranidhana, which will mature our unripe nature. See, maybe my offerings to God need purification. Like if I'm just cutting up fruit, putting in a bowl and offering in front of the altar, and all of a sudden I don't feel like it was accepted. So maybe I need to pray the mantra over it. Maybe I need to wash it. Maybe I need to have certain articles that I'm going to place it on in front of the deity. And then I'm going to have to sit there and do mantras over it. There are aspects to offering food and incense and everything like this. You keep them in mind as you do the practice, see. So this will fill up these requirements for doing worship. And you'll realize that there are many of them. Singing a song. So I could sing you a song to Ishvara right now. See, and that way, it's like, why don't I? Since I'm mentioning it, let's see what tapas is all about for Swami Vivekananda. Om Himadre Ashrame Jayancham Nirmitaha Bhujanga Svagbini Vriti Nutanacha Stavoyam Yapate Sabakya Taraha Sashaktim Parushim Viragam Charjati Narendra Shashave Narendra Yovane Narendra Kridane Narendra Shikshane Narendra Palane Narendra Shikshane Vivekanandate Prabhate Patanjali. And it goes on with 10 more verses. Well, basically, this has to do with Vivekananda's being this great being who practiced austerities. And the man, the Swami who wrote this hymn to Swami Vivekananda long after Vivekananda had passed, was known for his ability to do austerities and retire. So he says, ashrame. You see, so basically, all those who would attain freedom, we encourage the chanting of this hymn, composed in a sacred Himalayan mountain retreat. That's an austerity. You go to the Himalayas, you go to a retreat, you meditate upon your Ishtam with Pranidhana, with devotion, and you have your scriptures there that you study each morning, like they do in monasteries, and you do tapasya by being on retreat. So he says, devoted recitation of these verses to Swami Vivekananda imbues one with physical vigor, mental strength, and spiritual power, and increases discrimination and detachment. So what more of a description could you want for austerity, study, and devotion to God than such a verse like that, written by a Swami of our present time who's still alive? So just an example coming upon that when we talk about Ishvara Pranidhana. The quote there by Vedavyasa then, one's daily practices of yoga repeat with all the various movements and actions of one's life, and even the very energy with which one engages one's existence, lest the fruits of all these acts, all these are to be offered to God. This is Ishvara Pranidhana. So we have some great soul like Vedavyasa coming along some centuries after the father of yoga's incarnation as Patanjali, and reviewing his 8-limb yoga system and making comments like this. And so he wasn't about to overlook Kriya Yoga. See? So you don't, if Patanjali hadn't looked at his own system and said, how can I slim this down for people? See, 8 limbs, that's a lot. They have 5 yamas, 5 niyamas. There's a lot to do there, right? Then they have to master their posture, breathe, open up the nadis. Then when that's done, they have to, go beyond the occult powers that are pressing on them, and they have to withdraw from everything, get their mind pratyahara, right? Get their mind undistracted. Then with that undistracted mind, concentrate. 6, 7, get meditation. 8, have samadhi. That's a lot to do, right? 8-limb yoga he gave them. So Vedavyasa comes along. Patanjali looks back in his own system. Very early on, you could do this. You could do these 3. As you look at the 8 limbs of yoga and study, as you become more adept at the practices, concentrate on these 3. That is what? Get strong, be able to renounce, do your austerities, like the Swami who just wrote this verse. Be willing to go on a retreat. See, be willing to spend more time with your guru in the scriptures and the teachers and the teachings, the Dharma, the Atmagyan, and add more aspects to my worship of God. It's not enough just to walk around and say, God, I love you, God, I love you. You see, you should show the Lord you love him, just like you would show your wife or your husband or your children how much you love them. You don't just have them and then leave them on their own devices. You show them your love. The same with divine reality. In accordance with the triple tenet of Kriya Yoga, we should bring out this word, samapatti. Basically, the 3 treasures of Patanjali are yoga, samadhi, and samapatti. He puts these very close in that second pada of slokas. He puts that very close to this teaching on Kriya Yoga. So, see, he doesn't want you to get off track. So basically, the whole thing, the first treasure, if you're looking at these three niyamas as practices you have to do, you have to then keep the three treasures in mind as you do that. One is reach self-perfection. That is, you want to climb the tree of yoga to the eighth limb. You don't want to stop somewhere along the way and get waylaid or enjoy the fruit of a lower limb and just stay there, fall victim to the occult powers, so forth and so on. You want to go all the way to the eighth limb and have that samadhi, which the seers are telling you about, and which Father of Yoga set the system up to allow you to do. So samadhi would be the first treasure of yoga, isn't that very nicely put? It's like, oh, I have to start down here on the yamas, but I have to remember the Father of Yoga told me that the essence of the whole thing is samadhi. So samadhi, shuddhir, Ishvara Pranidhana, Pada 2, Sloka 45, is this, the non-dual state of samadhi is reached by devotion to the Lord. So from this time on, I hope nobody's ever going to walk up to me and say, oh, there was no devotion in the yoga system. There was no mention of God in the yoga system. The whole thing is about devotion to God. It's just that they're not pulling that out as something maybe distracting to people of the age. They're showing you how devotion, what the devotion dynamics of devotion really are, how you build up to proving your love for the Lord. Otherwise, there's so many versions of love that are not conventional, that are compromised, that are self-motivated, so forth, that are conditioned, right? Because you always hear the term unconditional love. Well, that for the Lord, that you'll see that in Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. If you want to know what love for God looks like, study him. And in that study of Sri Ramakrishna would be a part of your Svadhyaya, by the way. I mean, how many times have I gone through the Gospel of Ramakrishna over the 50 years or so since I laid my hands on it? You all know because I put out a book on 700 stories of Ramakrishna. Over the last couple of years, I put out 700 God blogs, 5 a week for all of you to study. So this is studying a great scripture, Svadhyaya. This is Svadhyaya. Memorizing it, seeing what he said, remembering what he said, explaining what he said. That's the point here. So as you do all of this Kriya Yoga, if you focus in on that, you might say as your Vedantic practice. And Vedanta is not a practice, but I do have this Kriya Yoga that was given to me. I'm still doing austerities. I'm still studying the scriptures and memorizing things. I'm still increasing my devotion to God, my bhakti. As all that goes on, know that the whole point, the first treasure of it all, is to reach self-realization. Second treasure, samadhi itself. What is that then that I'm trying to reach? Absorption in God consciousness. So this is why samadhi shuddhir, the non-dual state, right? Devotion to God will help you into that. It's like you have to pass through some inner gate on a very high mountain, high elevation of the mountain of consciousness to get into the light of Brahman and realize what happens to you. See? So this is a great journey, inward journey that you're making, the adventure of consciousness, they sometimes call that. And that's what samadhi is the point. Samadhi needs to be understood once you had it. So those are two treasures of yoga right there. And 3, samapatti, abiding equanimity of mind. There are 2 states of it, savichara and nirvichara. Savichara means transforming consciousness by contemplating ego, mind, intelligence, tanmatras, time, space, causality, luminosity, etc., etc. So these are your meditations, right, on Ishvara and all the aspects. So it wasn't hard for Patanjali to lay that out because Lord Kapila had already done it for him. So now he says, look back on those and meditate on them. He wants you to meditate on your ego, for instance. so that you find out that it's like an onion, all peelings with no center, and it makes you cry, as we like to joke. Or he wants you to meditate on your own buddhi, your own intelligence, so that can become honed and sharpened. And your mind complex, oh, it's so much attached to dualities all the time. It's going back and forth. I think I want to ask the Lord to remove that. Itani vinati raghunandana se. Right? I start singing something by Tulsidas that says, "Oh Lord, please help me to quit seeing duality." Because the dualities have become real, non-duality is not anymore. Dualities are okay if they're placed behind the non-dual reality. So reality first, duality later, you might say. So that's the savichara part of samadhi in general. You transform your consciousness by meditating on these higher tattvas. Nirvichara is freedom from all reflections. So you meditate upon those in Vedanta, for instance, to say, oh, I see neti neti. It's really not that. That's not the essence. Now that I've meditated on them, I realize that my mind has to dissolve into the Mahat. I realize my intellect has to dissolve into the mother wisdom, right? I realize that my very energy has to drive to Gata Prana, has to be offered to my Ishtam. See? And so these are the realizations that happen from savichara to nirvichara samadhi. And so that's samahati, they call it. You found out samadhi was to be had. You had it and defined it. And now this is how you keep it going at two levels, right? Like having two eyes inside. The 5 types of yogis are on there. I won't go into that. Basically, the first 3 are not able to culminate and get samadhi. Those are those who are born with an aspect, with aspiration, but don't fulfill it in their life. And those that seek to experience it via drugs and elixirs, and those who repeat the mantra without knowing its meaning, they fail the path of yoga again and again. This is what Vedavyasa says after watching Patanjali's system for centuries and people trying to practice it. But he said, those beings I saw that succeeded, guess what they mastered? The first element of Kriya Yoga, Tapas. See, they are willing to undergo various ascetic practices that take away everything superfluous and give them this wonderful knowledge of the treasures of yoga. And finally, samadhi itself comes to them. So that's Vedavyasa's commentary on 5 types of beings, 3 that always fail the path and 2 that succeed. He says there, his own quote is, the first 3 types fall from grace due to pride and negligence. The other 2 are true luminaries, standing as examples for mankind. We saw like Vivekananda coming as a supreme exemplar for that. And then this final quote here on this chart by Vedavyasa, the noble Kriya Yoga is to be practiced with the sole aim of attaining samadhi. So I don't need to bring in here again, do I, all the things that you shouldn't end up in Kriya Yoga doing, according to other systems. Here's the point. That's the real cleverness, as we were talking about yesterday in that God blog, right? The real cleverness is how to get samadhi, but all these distractions in the way need to be gotten behind you. The implementation brings about starvation of the kleshas and even burns their seeds to end any further production. Nice the way he puts it. To implement this Kriya Yoga and get samadhi, you have to starve the kleshas. That is ignorance, attachment, aversion, egotism, clinging to life. Starve them. They don't really have a life anyway, so it's not going to be that hard to get rid of them. Thereafter, clarity of wisdom and its awareness will reveal the separate nature of sattva and purusha, enhancing the possibility of further involution. So there's a whole series of teachings in the Fathers of Yoga, that the dynamics of which Patanjali are talking to you about, of how to get the soul beyond even sattva. Because at some point, just like the occult powers were in the way at one point, after getting over those, then the soul becomes attached to feeling good about itself in a sort of pseudo-spiritual way. And then that austerity becomes weakened, you see. So this is why you keep reading the scriptures, you keep practicing the austerities, you keep increasing your devotion of God. Kriya Yoga stays with you the whole way, so that it gives you this great strength to transform sattva into pure sattva. And just read the Vivekachudamani of Shankara to find out how that happens. From sattva to sattva shuddha, it says you go from sattva to shuddha sattva, pure sattva. And that means what he just said there, the willingness to practice these austerities and to keep doing it too. It's not stop somewhere and say, okay, enough austerities, I'm perfect enough. As if that's ever a good idea in Maya, in the realms of name and form. So you want the consummate realization of samadhi for all time, because that's dissolving. We talked about that already. It's dissolving into Ishvara, and then Ishvara opens the gates to the non-dual state. All right, what else I had for you is just a quick look here at what we're talking about when we talk about tapas. And it's a good segue, because at the bottom here, we can look at the lower left-hand corner. There's how, according to Shankara, sattva turns into pure sattva. So from the bottom up, or no, from the top down, traits of mixed sattva. First of all, get rid of pride. You must have adarpana, absence of pride, because Vedavyasa just told us that the first three kinds of yogis fall from grace and from attainment because of pride. And what I'm calling here beneficial denial. I like the term, you see. That's taking away something because it's good to take it away, not because you feel like you have to or someone told you to. Observance of spiritual practices. So those are the Yamas and Niyamas. Control of sense organs, faith in God, Shraddha, devotion to Ishvara, Bhakti, desire for liberation, mumukshutvam, a divine nature, that is attaining a divine nature, and then living in renunciation, nivritti. Those are traits of mixed sattva. So people who have those are on the way. People who go further attain pure sattva, and that's down here. They get pure prasadam, atmic sattva, and they become blissful by nature. Sadhanandam rasam, Shankara says. In self-realization, pure sattva is self-realization, anubhuti. It's also supreme peace, prashanti, and it's joyous and cheerful, triptihi praharshaha. So that's how we're just segueing from the other chart to get from mixed sattva or sattva itself to pure sattva. Now let's look at how it goes deeper in this second box. First of all, freedom while embodied equals disembodied freedom. That's a nice turn of phrases that Shankara uses. So if you can be free here, attain Jivan Mukta, then you'll be, of course, free in a disembodied state. And probably the opposite would be true. If you feel bound here, then you'll feel bound when you get outside of the body, like bound into the ancestor loop or into heaven. You won't feel that restless air of heights they talk about, which is non-duality. We were just talking about that. Samadhi, siddhir. Knowing that perceiving difference from Brahman brings fear. celebrating the glory of the indivisible self, dealing with ignorance via abidance in the Atman, observing the unreality of the world via constant discrimination, remaining of cheerful mind and disposition, seeing that the real is blissful while the unreal brings about suffering, and being clear that there is no freedom for body-bound souls. These are some powerful reflections that Shankara gives to us for the person who's reached pure sattva. In other words, this is what they're thinking now. If you compared that to what they were thinking either when they were in mixed sattva, because there were still broodings going on, or even before they started the spiritual path, especially, you'd see their mind was thinking completely different things. So just look at some of the minds of this world to see what they're thinking, what they're focusing on, war, and so forth. And you'll just see the vast difference between the mind before transformation and after transformation. That's before Samadhi and Samapata and before it. The top box on the left are some methods. You think there's no methods in Advaita Vedanta? Let's see what the Advaitists themselves say. Contemplating perfect union with Brahman, always. Knowing the self and Atman as the truth in all. Abiding devoutly in the self. Nurturing the Brahman state. Always denying the non-self or the ego self. Carefully observing avarana and vikshepa shakti. You got to be careful of that covering and distorting power getting into your way of thinking. You've already seen it in the world, and you've seen it in the lower worlds. You have to be careful of it now in your balance, your state of balance that you've achieved, that it's not causing you any doubt or diversions. Noting clear distinction between the seer and the seen. That goes on. Viveka Vairagya. Consciously destroying the seeds for rebirth. Birth and death are very painful, my dear. May you never have to experience them again. So I'd say if you were thinking about that before you practiced yoga, you'd go, well, maybe it's true, I don't know. But if you were thinking about it after you had a higher state of yoga and sattva and balance and all that, you'd probably lay awake at night thinking about it. I don't think I want to be reborn again. Do I want to be reborn again? Let me look back on my life and see what I went through. What was worth it? What did I suffer? Do I want to risk coming back again? So you're having this kind of deep reflection about having to do this all over again. That doesn't happen to people who are attached to nature. They have no thought otherwise than to come back again, even if they don't believe in rebirth. So that's just the nature of things, is to come back. You must have seen it in the plants and the animals and the planets and suns and on and on. You don't think it's there in human beings too. So this is one of those great liberating methods of Advaita Vedanta. Is you can say right now, I'm not coming back again. I've had people, my own students, tell me that. And Holy Mother said that to Sri Ramakrishna once. Their case, of course, much different. But people would say, I'm not coming back here again. They're very definite about it. They've seen what's here. It's a mean prize, as Vivekananda said. And probably people like that have already realized that it's already in them. So they've had it. They always have it. So why should I go chasing it again? It's like a dog chasing its tail, rebirth. Have you seen that? Round and round again. Never catches it. Maybe it gets a little nip of it once in a while. And so these methods are completely mental, intellectual, psychologically, and spiritual, aren't they? There's no effort in this. It's all in the enlightened mind, or the mind that's gaining enlightenment. Exerting effort towards eliminating false seeing. Puts it very nicely in the last one there. So why am I bringing up this chart? I'm bringing up this chart to show you what austerity leads to. That is tapas. This is an effort. See the mountain climbers up there, and even at night. So they're on their way toward the pinnacle. This quote here is nice about it. That one who worships in the sacred and stainless shrine of the Atman, which is independent of time, space, and distance, which is present everywhere, which is the destroyer of the pairs of opposites, and which is the giver of eternal happiness, becomes all-knowing, all-pervading, and attains hereafter immortality, says Shankara, the great non-dualist. He also says down here along the way, when the veiling power disappears, the distinction between the universe and Brahman becomes clear, and change is then perceived in phenomena only, never in Brahman. So you're going to have to see Brahman and the changing world, divide them, because when they're mixed, so it's sort of like Sri Ramakrishna said, when you mix milk with water, or then pretty soon you can't see the milk, you can't see the water. They merge with each other and they change each other's nature, as it were. So that's the thing with Brahman in the world. Yes, Brahman is here and everywhere. How clearly do you see that? I want to see it exceptionally clearly. So I think I'll separate everything that changes from the one unchanging thing, and then see Brahman in the world separately in an unmixed view from here. See? And then that yoga is balanced. And now what do I notice from that? When I look at the two, yes, that's unchanging and that's changing, but this, what I see from this is that change is only taking place there. It's never taking change in reality. So change doesn't exist in reality. That's called parinama, the appearance of change. But the non-dual says aparinama. There's no transformation going on. It's all a sleight of hand. The only other thing about this chart on austerity is up the climb. Prakasha Shakti, we talked about it. Isha was talking about it yesterday at satsang, was it? Or in God blogs. That's the revelatory power. So that's why I put here, you have to be very careful of the presence of veiling power and distorting power, right? If you can strip the veiling power away, you feel safe and say, wait a minute, it still doesn't look right, some things. That must be the distorting power that's doing that. I have to clarify that. Go to my teacher. See, I was well along the path. I thought I didn't need a teacher anymore. Bad idea. Then later on, as I went along the path, I found out veiling power might have been gone thanks to the grace of the guru, but there's some distorting power there I can't figure out. I should go back and ask them and refer to the seers in the scriptures through my Svadhyaya so that this all clarifies the picture for me. Then I can get to the revelatory power. This climber is about to get the revelatory power. We're going to get the highest view from the pinnacle of consciousness. And this one's along the way and good. And this one's just there, you see. So this along the way is they're getting viveka khyati. That's both in Buddhism and in Vedanta is a very powerful attribute of spiritual practice. You could say you probably wouldn't get that without tapas. You'd maybe say you could get some viveka. Oh, I can see where it's true, changing the unchanging, the real, the unreal, the wheat from the chaff. Yeah, I can, but to actually come to realize that it's the truth and see it without any doubt, that's viveka khyati. It's clarification of everything. And Prakasha Shakti is allowing you to have that. At a very high level, then, that's, of course, Adhyatma Brahma itself. You're getting to the non-dual state. Probably the quickest I've ever gone through that chart, but it's a good example of the Kriya Yoga's first aspect, right? I mean, you say, well, do I have to go and fast? Do I have to go without food for a long time? Do I have to do mauna and not talk? Do I have to go to a cave for a long time and not see anybody? Those are austerities, right? But those are taxing the body, you see, quite often. So what did he say back here? As long as it doesn't tax the body, it's a good austerity. So the Father of Yoga doesn't want you to burn out the body, the breath, the lungs and the nervous system, like the Kriya Yoga components of today are talking about. You're just burning it out like a person who exercises too much. A little exercise is good. Take a walk. You don't have to overdo it. So in that case, then you're having this other kinds of austerities. That's why this chart was created. And this is the real austerity to me. If you can understand that ignorance does not exist, that the unreal does not exist, and that the real only is in existence. Na asat vidyate bhavana bhavo vidyate sataha ubayor api drishantos to anuyos tattva darshibihi. To see darshan, have truth, is to see really that ignorance I was trying to get rid of never existed. I thought it existed. And now that I've gotten rid of it, I see a wide open field. I realize that I was always perfect, that I am Atma Brahma, that's a selfish Brahman, that I'm the child of the mother. And this is going to increase my ability to understand the scriptures and my ability to worship God exponentially. So this is austerity in Vedanta, Advaita Vedanta. See? So this is how Sattva Guna, transcending reflections and liberating methods of Advaita work as tapas. Let's go ahead and look at a little deeper look at Jnanam, then. That's Svadhyaya. I finally realized at some point that I really wanted to explain this to people, and I wanted to have a real good teacher of it. So I studied Vasishtha's yoga, and I found out that his teaching to the young Rangchangpa was one of the best ways, one of the ways that the obvious became more studied. The obvious means because so many people are ready to throw the books out the door. Even you hear Vivekananda say something in books and temples vain thy search. Well, it doesn't mean the revealed scriptures when he's saying books. So you probably need a teacher to explain this to you. And so we go to Lord Vasishtha, who's teaching the Atmagyan. And I would say Atmagyan is probably beyond even just dharmic teachings. And it's definitely beyond morality and ethics. You might say those are sort of three steps: morality and ethics of religion, and then the dharma of taking vows and all of that. Then you've got this Atmagyan, which you got by Viveka, right? You came to discern that, whoa, those words are powerful. Like our seminar last week. Well, wow, there's some real power in those little bijams, and there's some deities with them too. So everything can be compacted down just to a tiny little thing. This is exactly what happened to the atom, you see. So it can happen in matter. Couldn't it happen in spirit? That's a lot is compacted down into something, and you could implode it rather than explode it. Makes sense to me. So here we have Vasishtha's way of talking about it, and I can make this real simple for you without a lot of words. There's just three things here, basically. There's those who possess jnanam. There are those who are familiar with it, he says, and there are those who are unacquainted with it. That's how he puts it in a very sweet and nice way. Jnanam is this essential knowledge you have to have about your true nature. And secondly, how your true nature is one with the Supreme. Jiva is Shiva. I chanted that yesterday. That's before God blogs. So basically, the Jiva is Shiva. This Jiva, this embodied being, really, if you take away all the things that are, if you neti all away, the things that change, then you'll see just nothing but the Atman there and Brahman. So that needs to be perceived from a higher level of consciousness. So these are the three kinds of opinions you have. So we want to look at the difference of them. And they're divided across by the opinion itself, the world, what the world thinks, study and meditation, how it plays into it, and worship of the guru. Isn't that right there almost Kriya Yoga? So those who possess jnanam declare that you should give one part of the mind to treating atmic reality. So you should think about non-duality. Give one part of the mind to study of methods to remove desire. Give a third part of the mind to study of ways of self-cognition, and a fourth part of the mind to how best to worship the guru. So the mind is divided, the jnanam is divided into four things in that person who knows that jnanam is the essential thing to have. We're talking from the standpoint here now of Svadhyaya, right? You have graduated to Svadhyaya from Tapas. And so this is what those who have jnanam tell you. Let's divide your mind in four ways. Treat the atmic reality, make sure desires are getting attenuated all the time. Find out ways to cognize the oneness between Jiva and Shiva, or Jivatman and Paramatman, and then continue worshiping the Guru. So you won't find people saying, oh, the Guru is not necessary anymore. You don't have to depend upon him. Those who know Jnanam know that they're going to have to go to that source, like that source went to its source. And we're going to one of the sources of all sources here, because this is Lord Vashishtha is one of the 10 mind-born sons of Lord Brahma, out of which the bijams came, the wisdom came. Well, let's see what the difference between that is and those who are just partially familiar with Jnanam. They say give, well, one part of the mind, they declare, give one part of the mind to the world, give one part of the mind to study and meditation, and give two parts of the mind to worship of the Guru. So you can see there's not a full ripening of the true meaning of Jnanam in them yet. They're just partially familiar with the role of Jnanam and things. You'll see that amongst a lot of the people of the world who are, say, practicing the path of Bhakti Yoga or practicing the path of Karma Yoga, even meditation. I think a lot of those people aren't aware of the true role of Jnanam and how deep it can take you. Those who are completely unacquainted with Jnana Yoga say, give two parts of the mind to the world, and then give one part of the mind to study and meditation, and give one part of the mind to worship for the Guru. And of course, all three of these opinions are not what you'd call worldly. They don't belong to worldly people. These are all practitioners. But it shows that Lord Vashishtha has looked out upon people who are practitioners, who are aspirants, who are students, and he's seen the difference in those who have acquired Jnana, those who are just familiar with it, and those who really don't have it yet. He says here, contemplate deeply that nothing truly exists, not you, not you, nor only only one Jnanam, Lord Vashishtha says. Contemplate deeply, find that nothing truly exists, not you, only the one Jnanam exists. So that's how important this Jnanam is this higher wisdom is to the seers. Neither you nor I really exist. You know, that one non-dual wisdom exists, and it's our very nature. So this is a quick look through Jnana Yoga's role in terms of Svadhyaya. What was it again? Study, recite the mantras, and acquaint yourself with the revealed scriptures. So let's look then a little bit deeper at the third element of Kriya Yoga, called Ishvara Pranidhana. For this, it was wonderful to take Surya Narayan. He's one of the 5 great paths of the world in India. That is the sun god. And you can see him standing there in all his glory, depicted in image. And around him are all these beautiful slokas, many of which you probably know by heart. Like one is Om Bhur Bhuva Swaha Tat Savitur Varenyam, that's all about the shining light. And then one is about the inmost self, Na Tatra Suryavati Na Chandra Tarakam. One is shining like burnished gold, highest and deepest, the core intelligence of living beings. You know that chant too. All of these are on our Svadhyaya list, by the way, to memorize. And so that's why if we've memorized them, then we're responding to this teaching about Ishvara in terms of the light of the sun god. But the one up here that might not be so familiar is at the top from the Akshi Upanishad. Akshi means this center, the light that's at the center. Akshi Upanishad is talking about a consciousness that has become non-dual and is seeing through the sixth center, that is the third eye, or Jnana Chakshu. So it says in the Akshi Upanishad, there rises the thousand-armed, existent in myriads of ways, the life of all animate beings. Meditate upon that one who is omniform, all compassionate, omniscient, ambrosial, and is the essence of light, the scorcher. That's like the sun burning away all impurities. Salutations to the blessed offspring of the infinite, the power of all eyes to see, the flood of endless days. The flood, all hail, all hail. Jai Surya Narayan. Om Namah Surya Narayan. So this is all about the sun. You can see here his rays themselves have such things to do with Brahman and Shakti, sentiency and pure consciousness, and insight and awareness, wisdom and intelligence, knowledge and mental comprehension, physical light and the light of prana inside. And he's called the commander of the ocean, the armies of the ocean of light. He's the commander of them. And he's the revealer of darkness at the same time. So that means if there's darkness in the soul, he'll show it to you. And then he'll show you how to light it up, to bring light to it. Down at his feet is the eternal flower of life, which he grants through his emanations. And in the garland of nature, all belong to him. His spear there is the self, the staff of the flood of endless days that he grants to living beings. Can you count the days you've lived in your life right now? Maybe in terms of years you can, not in terms of months and days, most likely. So when you look at it in increments like that, how many days you've had here in the body to enjoy the sunlight here. And without the sun, no terrestrial activity would be possible. That's actually a quote right out of the non-dual stotrams. And there at his heart is the explorer of the ethers, the sky wanderer. So it means his rays will start as the sun of non-dual wisdom, and then his rays will spread out through the seven worlds, all the way down to the Puralokas. So what you're looking at is millions of suns in the night sky here on the physical earth are representations of light at deeper and deeper levels of consciousness, all the way up to the Trinity, the grand sun, which burning all other lights burn. So it's the light of the Atman, the light of Brahman, as the quote says here, which all other lights, including the light of the sun, the moon, fire, lightning, and everything here gets its radiance from. It's the emanation of that one light. That one light shining, all else shines. By its light, all is made radiant, says the Upanishad. So here's a good example of how we can increase our devotion to one of the great aspects of God here, the sun god, Surya Narayan, who's, again, not just an orb in the sky, to people who worship the physical sun, not just the astronomer. You see, he looks at millions of suns, some of them so big that you can't even fly a jet around them in years. Take you, so they're so big. So they get to admiring, and being overwhelmed by different kinds of sun. But we're looking here at the sun of wisdom, the very source of all of our thought and our wisdom and knowledge. And in that way, we know who Surya Narayan is. And when you salute the physical sun every day, then you should be thinking, like in terms of these austerities you are doing, you should be thinking of the sun god in terms of those austerities and reading in the scriptures about them. I myself read in the scriptures this week about the sun god in 3 sources: Rig Veda, the Mahabharata, and the Stotram, which I can sing a little bit to end the class, as we look at how Ishvara Pranidhana rounds up this beautiful yoga of Kriya Yoga with its 3 great aspects and its 3 great treasures. So this is verse 6 and 7 from the Aditya Hrudaya Stotram. And you might have heard of Agastya, the great sage. Oh, he made an appearance in the Ramayana just before the battle of Ram, Chandra, and Ravana, and taught this hymn to Sri Ram so that he could banish Ravana and then come to full realization of the power in the sun god. Rashmi mantam samudyantam deva swarna mashkritam purja shva vivashya svantam bhaskaran bhuvaneshvaram Sarvadevatmako yesa tejasvi rashmi bhavananaha Esha deva suragana lokan pati gabashtibihi O brothers and sisters, worship the God of the sun, the ruler of the worlds and the Lord of the universe, who is crowned with infinite effulgent rays, who appears fortuitously and brings light to all, who is revered by gods and demons alike. Indeed, he is the very embodiment of all the deities. He is self-luminous, sends forth all physical and wisdom rays. He nourishes and energizes the inhabitants of all the worlds. Gods and demigods alike benefit by his powerful emanations. Om Jai Surya Narayan. Om Jai Surya Narayan. Om Jai Surya Narayan.